yeah, 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 yeah. Ayo, yeah, la, yo, le, yeah, yo, yeah, la, yeah, so,
Welcome to the Caribbean Voice TV, where we highlight all regions in the Caribbean by showcasing the sights, sound, taste, and impact of the people. I'm Rosen Green.
And I'm T. Billy Martin. Today we are taking you on a special journey to Jamaica with the live footage of the closing of the 2015-16 budget debate.
The budget debate provides the government with the opportunity to take stock of its performance over the previous fiscal year, to measure its progress in relation to the targets previously set, and to assess the effectiveness of its management of the country's finances. It is opened by the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Peter Phillips, on March 12, who outlines how the various programs and policies of the government will be financed and how the money will be raised.
The budget debate usually begins after months of intensive planning by financial experts. Such planning needs careful attention, since it decides the welfare of the nation for the next 12 months and might even have important effects for the following years. During the budget debate, ministers report on the work done in government departments under their portfolios and outline plans for the coming financial year.
The Minister of Finance, who presents the budget and opens the debate, also has the privilege of speaking last, and he closes the budget debate. After the Minister of Finance has presented the budget and make his opening address, the House of Representatives create the Standing Finance Committee to study the budget and make recommendations. We now join in the live debate courtesy of the Jamaica Information Service.
Well, we seem to have some type of technical difficulty, but we are definitely squaring that away as we speak. I want to say thank you to everyone who is tuning right now. We are actually live. Thank you for watching Caribbean Voice. And be sure to like again, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, we are all on it. So right now, here we are, the live debate courtesy of the Jamaican Information Service.
For new products, for export, and for products to replace imports that did not exist before. That is why, for example, it is possible for Red Stripe to explore the production of cassava to replace imported barley, to provide the carbohydrate base for their product. That is also why producers of animal feeds are looking at cassava and sorghum to replace imported corn and wheat from the United States. You know what I like about this debate most of all is the improvement in your hearing. I'm not laughing. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
All right.
I'm not laughing. You know, no, but is a nice gentleman.
Sit down and take it. You sit down and relax. You're going to hear more.
And that is why, Mr. Speaker, because of these reforms, some of our bakeries are now selling baked products from Jamaica in New York and London, Birmingham, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and elsewhere. That is why our pepper and our jerk sauce. But more.
You don't eat jerk pork. You're an Adventist.
Secondly, Mr. Speaker, fiscal consolidation, including a close to balanced budget which we have operated for the past 2 years and which we will operate this year as well, makes possible low interest rates, which again increases the incentives for production and indeed for export production. The central bank signal rate, the 30-day CD rate, remains at an unprecedented low since the issue of that instrument started over 2 decades ago. Treasury bill rates are currently at 2-year lows, with the latest outturn in March for the 180-day Treasury bill rate below 7%. Commercial bank loans are around a 3-year low. Building societies' lending rates are at an all-time low at rates not observed as far back as the beginning of the millennium. Short-term money market rates, interest rates in particular, the average rate in the overnight private money market is at a historic low. What is more, there seems to be no understanding on the part of those commentaries which I cite that all the adjustments that have been made to the Customs Act, to tax administration of Jamaica and its procedures, for example, are part of a public sector transformation effort that is intended to facilitate the emergence of more efficient private enterprises and to facilitate exporters as much as anyone else. Also, as is the case with the improvement of electricity generation and the lowering of energy costs, the implementation of significant tax reforms, as I have indicated, has been the most expansive undertaken and is aimed at boosting businesses and production. The defining concept of the tax reform has been not to pick particular winners in particular sectors and offer them incentives, but rather to create an economic environment in the country as a whole that will allow the enterprising investor, small, medium, or large, to organize efficient production of goods and services, whether for domestic consumption or for export. They seem, whether by way of ignorance or oversight, if we are to be charitable, to have ignored the fact that effective tax rates have been reduced, not for some, but for all. They also conveniently ignore the fact that duties have been reduced for all productive inputs and intermediate goods, and that the corporate tax rate has been reduced, except for regulated companies, from 33.33% to 25%. Generous capital depreciation allowances have been introduced, as well as the employment tax credits to compensate for any statutory deductions. Even more so, we have expanded our efforts at labor reform with the passage of the flexi-work legislation and with the establishment of the Labor Market Commission. Mr. Speaker, the word incentives, by its very nature, creates an imbalance in a small country like Jamaica. And even more, it suggests that the poor and those who have no political connections must pay the taxes, while others get incentives. And that, I dare say, is at the heart of a feeling of injustice that so many people feel about the taxation system in the country. The tax reform that the government implemented allows for a leveling of the playing field that all can benefit. It is in this context of the structural reforms to the business environment, to the incentives legislation, and to the labor market that I wish to make a comment on a specific proposal or suggestion that the opposition spokesman on finance made concerning the introduction of investment tax credits. This proposal, although presented summarily, has received some attention in the media. And while this is not the place to enter into an extended technical debate on the relative merits of different types of tax incentives, I would just want to make the following comments. A variety of tax incentive instruments, whether tax credits, investment allowances, depreciation allowances, or lower tax rates, may be used to achieve the same objective of increasing the competitiveness of production located in Jamaica. That's what I think we are all seeking. Increasing investments, increasing economic growth, and job creation. Simply put, there is more than one way to skin a cat if what we're seeking is to achieve competitiveness. All of these instruments operate to reduce the effective rate of corporate income tax and increase the rate of return to the investor. There are various pros and cons for each of the instruments that may be chosen. But the reality is that what we have done is to introduce, not only to lower the rates, but to introduce an employment tax credit, and that, in a sense, can be calibrated to achieve the same impact as as what has been described as the investment tax credit. But more importantly, what the employment tax credit has done, Mr. Speaker, is specifically to incentivize employment and employment creation. And we have chosen to go that route. It is a fact also, Mr. Speaker, that after considerable consultation with various interest groups and various segments of civil society, and based upon the advice received, the government chose a combination of tax incentive instruments which achieve the following, because we have to include also the removal of the duties that was done on productive inputs and intermediate goods, the accelerated capital depreciation allowances which were introduced. All of that, and the increase in the incentives in the employment tax credit, all of that taken together with the removal of with the reduction of the corporate income tax rate, we consider to be more desirable. It is affordable. There is some provision. Not for regulated companies, but we have indicated, and we have indicated, and let me indicate it again. It is the policy of the government to bring the rate for all corporate entities into line. The regulated companies, particularly the financial institutions, recognize that they have a stake in our survival through the program, and that we have to make this 7.5% primary surplus. But I've given the commitment publicly, and I repeat it again. It is our intention to harmonize the rate for the corporate sector. But it's important to recognize that we think the principle that everyone should pay some tax to be an important principle in establishing a level playing field and building confidence in the social relationships in the country. All of this, Mr. Speaker, is part of our growth strategy. But I noticed also, and I find sometimes this pattern of ignoring the facts and ignoring the truth goes to ludicrous lengths. When, for example, the leader of the opposition stated, as he did in the debate, that I did not mention, the government did not mention the Goat Island project. I said, and I want to quote what I said on page 26 of my presentation. And I quote, in relation to the Portland Bight Development Project, the detailed technical and feasibility studies are being concluded by the investor team and discussions are ongoing with the Port Authority of Jamaica. I went on further to say it needs to be understood that $1 billion US project such as this doesn't just happen without extensive studies, technical preparation, and negotiation. Now, the only thing I can believe is that maybe the leader of the opposition didn't know that the Portland Bight project is the same thing as the Goat Island project. I will not repeat, Mr. Speaker, the extensive list of projects underway in the business process outsourcing sector, tourism sector, energy sector, agricultural sector, etc. What I would say, though, is that the reason why the Cabinet took the decision to provide a detailed matrix setting out the responsibility of each ministry for the is not to score any political points, but to further increase transparency and accountability so that any member of the House or any member of the public can see what we intend to do and measure our progress toward it. With respect to the 20-point prescription of the growth prescription of the opposition spokesman on finance, I am not certain that he intended us to take it very seriously. He was probably trying to just get to the number 20. For one thing, more than half of what he listed has already been done or is underway. I spoke, for example, of the government policy on education transformation and the commitment to the elimination of the shift system. We took 20 schools off it over the past 2 years, and we're going to take 24 schools off the shift system this year.
Wow, interesting.
They're getting spicy.
I know a lot of persons watching, they're like,
spicy.
oh my gosh, that's how the Jamaican Parliament business
I
happens.
see.
It's interesting.
Very interesting.
It's interesting, and as you can see, the opposition is trying to interject to put their piece, their bit into it. But over a 1 week period, they have been presenting their side in terms of the People's National Party that's in now. They presented their position as it relates to the development over the past year, and also the projection estimates of what's going to happen for the next 12 months. And then the opposition present how they could have done it better, and just point out in terms of some stuff that wasn't right, what some recommendation as to how they would do it themselves if they were in it. So you see how the bit goes. But also they spoke about the Honorable Peter Phillips, who is the Minister of Finance. He spoke about agriculture, which is a big thing, not just in Jamaica, but in
all the West Indies.
Right, in all Caribbean region. But it's a big export business for the Caribbean, because that is 65% of investment, because you know tourism is the major
money
income.
maker.
Yes,
it's the
for the Caribbean.
winner.
Correct, and also they
65%.
spoke. Yeah.
65% of the culture rely on tourism.
Which is a lot. And also the agriculture coming up second, because we export so many different things from there, because as you know, it's much more cheaper to export or produce than to eat, even though the motto is eat what you grow, grow what you eat. But in some instances, there are certain things that it's better to export those stuff to earn.
If you want to
Right,
gain a profit.
exactly, to gain the profit. He also spoke about Customs Act, which I know the Custom Act, it helps people. The flow of import-export makes it much more easier to do. And it helps you. For you persons who sending their big, you want to invest in Jamaica, you want to, open a business, or for those persons who are here, as we say, you're Jamaicans, or you're of Caribbean descent, you were concerned about the development of the country. This is why we are bringing to you the debate for you to see and make your own estimate.
Your own perspective.
Yeah,
your own,
of what's happening.
Yeah,
basically.
it makes you want to rethink, like, exactly how can I contribute? How can I be part of the problem or even the solution? So we just want to make sure that you understand that this is not just for the big businesses that are profitable, but it's also for you to make up your mind on, one, how do you want for this to progress, and also take note of who you want in office to represent you.
That's the major part.
So just so we know.
Yeah. So for this also, you make your own judgment of a strong word, but it's important for you to watch. Maybe you're saying, I don't need to watch this, but it's very important for you. And why we're carrying it to you for persons living in Brooklyn and the Tri-State area is for you to make, because I know there are a lot of persons from the Caribbean living here, and we want you to see what's happening, as we would say back home. So we're going to rejoin right now the Honorable Peter Phillips.
Right now, live, right now.
Is the quality of work being done by public officials in Jamaica. I'm not trying to belittle it. There's no, why they give an A grade when it is between 97 and 106? Is because it's recognized that it's unlikely ever to be precise and exact. Tax revenues you come from far? You should drink some water. You came on the new highway? You came on the new highway? Eh? You like the new highway? Not that one. Neither planned and only half built. Tax revenues for fiscal year 2015-2016 are projected to be 34 billion more than what we expect the outturn to be at the end of 2014-15. That is to say, 411.9 billion in 2015-2016, as against 377.9 billion, which is the outturn we expect for 2014-15. This is correctly noted by the opposition spokesman on finance. However, if we exclude the expected impact of both additional compliance measures and the new tax policy measures combined to yield 22.8 billion, then the 2015-16 revenues are passively projected to increase by only 3% to the expected, in relation to the expected outturn for 2014-15. This is a fairly conservative assumption, especially against the background of projected real GDP growth of 1.6% and targeted inflation of 5 to 6% for 2015-2016. Additional compliance is projected to yield roughly 12.4 billion in additional revenues on the basis of, among other things, specific and enhanced auditing and enforcement initiatives, a reduction in tax leakage through the implementation and enforcement of new legislation, and the administrative changes at the tax administration, Jamaica. As I've said before, Mr. Speaker, the expectations of additional compliance yields are not based on simple exhortation. But I want to comment briefly on the position posited by the opposition spokesman on finance on March 17th and the leader of the opposition on March 19th that I and the team at the Ministry of Finance were, quote unquote, in the words of one, deceptive, or that we, quote unquote, tried to trick the country about the gap in the budget. This is not an innocuous observation. If true, it would represent a potentially damning indictment of the professional and ethical standards of the leadership and staff of the Ministry of Finance and Planning. First point to be made, Mr. Speaker, is the fiscal policy paper statement tabled on February 19th, which makes it very clear that there is a gap of 10.4 billion which exists after we account for additional compliance. Part 1, page 7, and I will read the relevant sections. Section. Adherence, and I quote, adherence to the programmed primary surplus of 7.5% of GDP is necessary to sustain the debt reduction trajectory. In this regard, revenue measures will be implemented in fiscal year 2015-16. The new measures with projected yield of $10.35 billion will be provided in a ministry paper to be tabled in March 2015 during the opening of the budget debate. End quote. It's also quoted again in part 3, page 32. I won't go through this quote. Where is the trick? Where is the deception? Secondly, the first 6 hours of the Standing Finance Committee on March 3rd was with the Minister of Finance and Planning on the fiscal policy paper and the macroeconomic environment. Interestingly, nothing was asked about the revenue estimates. Nothing. Then on March 12th, when I opened the debate, I made it clear that if we exclude both the additional compliance and any new measures, then a gap of approximately 22.8 billion will exist. Far from being deceptive, the budget presentation actually made it transparent that an additional 12.4 billion in compliance yield had been programmed to the revenue estimates. This should have been clear and straightforward for any reasonable person reading the tabled documents and presentations. Mr. Speaker, we have to do better than this. We cannot just cavalierly impugn the reputation of the country and the integrity of its officials, not to mention threaten the country's access to global financial markets by suggesting that there is deception at work in the documents presented by the government of Jamaica. We can't do this just to score political points. Mr. Speaker, the opposition spokesman asked some relevant questions in relation to the oil hedge program. As I indicated, Mr. Speaker, the oil hedge program to be implemented by the government provides a unique and timely opportunity for us to manage how the country responds to the vagaries of oil price management and energy dependence over the short, medium, and long term. More to the point, it is the government's intention to establish, you had asked the question, opposition spokesman, member for North East Manchester. Right. You had asked the question.
Yes, look.
It is the government's intention to establish an energy stabilization fund to receive and manage the resources generated from the oil hedge program. These resources include the proceeds from a portion of the additional $7 per litre of specific STC, specifically $5 per litre, as well as any future payments from the hedge contract should future oil price movements lead to such payments. These resources will flow into a dedicated sub-account in the Bank of Jamaica for the fund, which will be administered by the Development Bank of Jamaica in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance and Planning. These resources, Mr. Speaker, will be made available to service the costs of implementing the initial hedge transaction, future hedging, as well as a number of energy stabilization initiatives where the resources permit. We will shortly table a ministry paper outlining the relevant governance arrangements for the Energy Stabilization Fund, including reporting and transparency arrangements. We also intend to bring legislation in the not-too-distant future which will establish in a binding and transparent way the energy stabilization purposes for which these resources may be utilized.
Good governance.
Yes. Yes.
You're not hiding anything in.
I don't want to tell you the exact number, but it's in the order of 3 point plus. 3 point plus. Yes, 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 yes. Not as a line item, no. Mr. Speaker, simply put, we intend to establish a transparent and binding covenant with taxpayers regarding the use of their tax dollars for the purposes for which they have been asked to contribute. In order to reflect the costs of implementing the hedge program on the expenditure side of the budget, an allocation has been made in the Ministry of Finance and Planning's contingency provision in relation to expenditures for this transaction, which was based on preliminary discussions held. The reintroduction of the GCT at the standard rate on monthly residential electricity above 350 kilowatt hours is above all things a conservation measure. It is deliberately designed to exclude most of the current residential customer base and will be borne substantially by higher income consumers. The measure is targeted in that based on current levels of usage, only the top 6% of residential customers will be impacted. So for those who feel exposed, it is recommended that you step up your energy conservation. With regard to the environmental levy, it seems clear from his comments that the opposition spokesman is laboring under a misconception. The reform of the environmental levy broadens the tax base by including CARICOM imports, while at the same time leveling the playing field for domestic manufacturing. In the interest of clarity, I'd like to note the following. The environmental levy is designed as an excise tax applicable to the import and or manufacturing of goods, including CARICOM imports. Domestic manufacturers will be able to claim a credit for any environmental levy paid at the port. This is a better situation for domestic manufacturers whose products compete with CARICOM imports of finished goods. Currently, manufacturers face the impact of the environmental levy, while corresponding imports from CARICOM do not. In relation to tax compliance issues, Mr. Speaker, I need to say something on a matter that has arisen between the government of Jamaica and Noranda Bauxite Company in relation to a dispute regarding their non-payment of the full bauxite levy for the period beginning January 1st, 2015, as required under the Bauxite Levy Act. The background is this: an interim regime was agreed between Aranda and the government of Jamaica in 2009 in the context of the global economic crisis, and was provided, understandably, to cope with the crisis and to support the efforts at raising the efficiency of the company. The clear understanding was that this arrangement would cover the period 2008-09 up to December 31st, 2014, and that Noranda would revert the standard regime on January 1st, 2015. Noranda is insisting on a 5-year extension of the concession. The government has honored the agreement with Noranda, which involves substantial revenue foregone. And in the circumstances facing the country, we are not able to grant an extension.
Well, we're listening. We're listening.
We are still here.
Very interesting. Very interesting. For those persons watching, watching us right now, or you're watching the live stream online, please, you can live tweet the Ministry of Finance and Planning at MOFPJA. So you can ask them any question, leave a comment as it relates to what's happening in the budget debate, and also some questions that you need answers for. So yeah.
Some question, any question.
Yeah.
Like you see people that's who have attended, that you may have a particular question for that person that you never got an opportunity to live tweet it. They are reading it. Seriously, live tweet.
Yes, they are. And a big part of what Honorable Peter Phillips talking about was taxes, a big aspect as it relates to how they finance the budget, a big part of that. And also an important point that he made was that the tax credit to businesses for employment, for persons getting, like companies, getting tax credit, it would better the business to employ more people, because at least they don't have to pay no taxes maybe a year or two. So that money that they have to employ more people, or they're able to pay more people, and they don't have to lay off a bunch of people because they don't have the money to do that. So the tax credit, I think, is a plus because it helps people, businesses small, whether it's again, you don't need to be a huge company. You don't need to be a corporate chain of companies for you to get the credit. So please be informed. Be informed. And again, we're bringing to you the debate because we want you to be informed and for you to know, ask questions, things that you don't know about, things that you want questions or answers to. Please tweet them, or you can join their Facebook page at facebook.com/the Ministry of Finance, which is the MOFP.gov.jm. Okay?
And also, don't forget to tweet us. Let us know, because we are live tweeting just along right with you. And find us on Facebook as well at Caribbean Voice TV.
And what you think about in terms of transparency? How should in terms of a government, your opinion of them being transparent, how they're spending people's money?
Oh, ooh. I mean, I'm just in awe of the civility of everyone's. Like, I'm hearing the opposition try to interject in their mannerism, but it's all being taken in stride. I feel like I want to physically be there and then have an opinion of it in overall. But I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoying the journey that they're all going through, and I'm glad that this discussion is being held. You know, I'm very proud to be a part of witnessing, and as you are, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are.
Right.
So I'm very curious and anxious to see what's the next step. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen at the end of this conversation?
Right.
So that's what I'm really most
because
excited about.
after the debate, they have to put these plans. They have to go ahead and make policies to ensure that all of these recommendations and policies that they have put in place will be carried out effectively. That is, because a year from now, you can judge whether or not the development or the promises, as we often say, is fulfilled to the general public. So we're going to go back to the Honorable Peter Phillips, who's going to keep giving you policies, recommendations, and facts in his budget.
The national budget, as the financing to cap is secured by its assets. Mr. Speaker, in regard to the National Insurance Fund, an actuarial review has been undertaken to assess the sustainability of the pension fund in the medium and long term. That report will be tabled in this House, I expect, in the month of April. In fact, a roadmap for the National Insurance Scheme in Jamaica was completed and a presentation made at the Labour Market Forum last December. The government is currently reviewing the study and will benefit from the comments of the House when it sets out the implementation plan to address the issues in relation to the fund. But I think we need to make it absolutely clear that the National Insurance Fund will remain viable and available to be called upon by the people of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, as we conclude this debate, I would like to quote a former Prime Minister and a former Minister of Finance. First, the former Prime Minister, and I quote, "Jamaica remains perpetually hooked on borrowings. Our earnings cannot support our level of indebtedness, so we have to keep borrowing to repay what we have borrowed, and to do whatever little we can do to provide desperately needed resources to the people," end quote. The Prime Minister goes on, "So often we have postponed what needs to be done, waiting for a more appropriate time. But the time can never be more appropriate than when it is necessary. And when that necessity is so significant, it becomes an imperative." And now to the quote from a former Minister of Finance, and I quote, "Our history is replete with missed opportunities. In the past, we have placed political opportunism above the national interest. For too long, we have postponed the inevitable and believe that we can do the same thing the same way, under the same conditions, and yet expect a different result. Many times we have underestimated the good sense and intelligence of our people, even though time and time again they have proven their strength, resilience, and deep appreciation of what is good for us and the development of our country." The first quote, Mr. Speaker, was from then Prime Minister, the Honorable Bruce Golding, in September 2009. And the second quote was from the then Minister of Finance, now opposition spokesman, Mr. Audley Shaw, in April 2009.
Your words goes on.
I would commend the opposition, and particularly the opposition spokesman on finance, to heed those thoughts. Mr. Speaker, those two comments highlight a dilemma which faces us in this House. It is perfectly understandable that each side in this House would seek to present themselves in the most favorable light. Electioneering is never far from the mind of any representative inside this House, and indeed, and outside. And I think that is the same for all parliaments. Yet what history and circumstance demands of us, Mr. Speaker, as was so evident in 2009, as it demands of us now, is that amidst this concern for the electoral contest, we nevertheless find the way to identify and debate with truthfulness, honesty, and sincerity those issues that are fundamental to the survival and the progress of our country. Truth should not become a casualty of our search for political advantage. If we don't proceed in that fashion, we will have forfeited not only the possibilities and prospects of our generation, but even more damningly, I said end quote. No, I was searching for a quote from you, but couldn't find it.
Only you can find a picture though when you broke off the finger.
Thank you. Thank you.
Find a quote, you can find a picture.
I remember one.
Yes, lightly. Yes.
I won't say it though. I won't say it. I won't say it. I won't say it. No. No, this is not the place for that quote. Mr. Speaker,
Somebody else can say.
if we don't proceed in that fashion, we will have forfeited not only the possibilities and prospects of our generation, but even more damningly, we will have forfeited the possibilities and prospects of future generations of Jamaicans. The truth is that this budget continues to support the progress that has been made by the country in correcting gross imbalances in our national accounts and in paying down the debt. It seeks to remain faithful to the solemn obligations that this government has entered into with the people of Jamaica to reduce the debt and honor our obligations that we have entered into with other members of the international community, including the International Monetary Fund and the other multilateral institutions and our bilateral partners. This budget, Mr. Speaker, provides the resources for the improved delivery of health services. This budget provides the resources to continue the progress in bringing an end to the shift system in high schools and to expand the nutrition programs for our students as we continue our efforts to create a labor force and a population educated and trained to global standards. This budget expands credit and training to the MSMEs in order to create more jobs and to make these sectors more competitive. This budget sets the stage for the dynamic expansion of employment in the BPO sector. Mr. Speaker, in spite of our challenges, this budget makes provision for us to meet our obligations to protect the poorest and most vulnerable in the society by expanding the social protection budget by $4 billion. This budget also provides further relief to taxpayers by raising the tax-free portion of their income and relieves another 9,000 Jamaicans of low income of the obligation to pay taxes. This budget ensures that our spectacular program of infrastructural development continues with an allocation of another $3 billion. This budget will finance the upgrading of our tourism townships through the Integrated Resort Development Program. A sum of $3.3 billion has been allocated for the improvement to the living spaces for citizens and visitors alike in our tourism areas. This budget will make the investment required for the continued reduction in the price of energy. This budget will expand the agri-parks initiative as we bring underutilized land and labor into a more efficient agricultural production system to produce crops at competitive prices and facilitate import substitution. This budget, Mr. Speaker, sets the stage for sustained economic growth and the expansion of opportunities for all the Jamaican people. The time has come, Mr. Speaker, and I move that the bill be read a second time.
Woo! That was a lot.
Yes, it was.
That was a lot.
Yes, it was.
But it was a good. It was a good watch. Thank you so much for tuning in with this special coverage that we brought to you of the Jamaica 2015-2016 budget debate. And this is the closing actually of the debate, and they have spoken about so many different things. And an important point that hit home for me was that they were talking about leveling the playing field with the taxes, and that the transparency of showing the public how they allocate your taxes. In any country, when you're paying your taxes, you want to ensure that there's transparency in terms of how it's been spent and where it's actually going. And that's very, 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 very important. So that's something I took away from it, basically. In any sense, what would you take away from? Just
what I took away from it is how important it is for a citizen to really strive to create your own business. You know, start up your own business, need to be, because even though there may be headaches along the way to do so, you can still you're going to profit yourself and your family with all of these incentives being lined up for you. And I took that. That's what I took away from listening to the Honorable Peter Phillips more than anything. Like, if I was there right now, I would, well, I do have this idea. Let me put this into play, because I see that the government is it have things lined up to benefit me along the way, not just in the process at the beginning, whatever, but along the way that I can leave behind for my family and future generations. So I thought that was very important. Very important.
And too, a lot of persons are a little bit timid in terms of you going to different countries and investing. And it's very interesting because you understand that to invest in someone else's country, you need security. You need to know that I'm not just going there to invest, you know what I mean, and then lose all my investment, but I'm going there to know that there's going to be a return. And not just that, you're helping the country.
Helping the country, yeah. I really appreciate the tax.
The tax credit.
Tax credit. That's an incentive that we need here. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Oh, yes. And I think that's very important. I'm sure for a lot of persons who are watching and you're here and you're Jamaican, or you're, as we would say, from a Caribbean background, basically, and you fully understand that to invest in your own country is very important, and to go back and to help people there is very important. And we have to be mindful that when these budget debates are going on, we watch both sides of the spectrum. We listen to both sides, both the ruling party and also the opposition, in terms of what they're presenting, what exactly you're bringing to the table.
Yep.
And I think the Minister of Finance, the ministry in total, the Ministry of Finance and Planning, they have a very, very important role to play in the overall budget debate, because that's where the finances to finance all the other ministries, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor, the different Ministry of Tourism, all those ministries, they allocate in terms of allocation of funding. So that's very important.
Well, unfortunately, that's it for our show today. Thank you, viewers, for being a part of the Caribbean Voice today. And thank you for joining us. It has been our pleasure sharing with you today. Remember that this is where we share all things Caribbean.
So don't hesitate to share your views with us. Feel free to email us at thecaribbeanvoicetv@gmail.com, or share a pic or leave a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/thecaribbeanvoicetv. I'm Roseanne Green.
And I'm T. Billy Martin. Thank you so much, Jamaica Information Services, for the live stream. And special thank you to the Ministry of the Finance and Planning. On behalf of the entire production team, we want to wish you warmth and blessings.
There's a trouble fight, gonna stop this war. A fire, fear, and jail. Somewhere in Africa, jail. There's a trouble fight, gonna stop this war. A fire, fear, and jail. People, you know, man is the roots of all evil. And modesty got no price or level, jail. Be what you are is not terrible, jail. Just be a man, don't be a devil. This one can make you good and say. Open your eyes and don't be blind, cause enemies come from behind. Give the faith as the sunshine. Just fire will be better. No wicked man will be running safe. Somewhere in Africa, jail. Happens a trouble fight, gonna stop this war. A fire.